Susan and Ned were driving through a wooded, empty section of highway. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, the sky went dark in the torrential downpour. "We had better stop," said Susan. Ned nodded his head in agreement. He stepped on the brake, and suddenly, the car started to slide on the slick pavement. They plunged off the road and slid to a halt at the bottom of an incline. Pale and shaking, Ned quickly turned to check if Susan was all right. When she nodded, Ned relaxed and looked through the rain-soaked windows. "I'm gonna see how bad it is," he told Susan, and went out into the storm. She saw his blurry figure in the headlight walking around the front of the car. A moment later, he jumped in beside her, soaking wet. "The car's not badly damaged, but we are wheel-deep in mud," he said. "I'm gonna have to go for help." Susan swallowed, nervously. There'd be no quick rescue here. He told her to turn off the headlights and lock the doors until he returned. Axe Murder Hollow. Although Ned hadn't said the name aloud, they both knew what he had been thinking when he told her to lock the car. This was the place where a man had once taken an axe and hacked his wife to death in a jealous rage over an alleged affair. Supposedly, the axe-wielding spirit of the husband continued to haunt this section of the road. Outside the car, Susan heard a shriek, a loud thump, and a strange, gurgling noise, but she couldn't see anything in the darkness. Frightened, she shrank down into her seat. She sat in silence for a while, and then she noticed another sound. It was a soft sound, like something being blown by the wind. Suddenly, the car was illuminated by a bright light. An official-sounding voice told her to get out of the car. Ned must have found a police officer. Susan unlocked the door and stepped out of the car. As her eyes adjusted to the bright light, she saw it. Hanging by his feet from the tree next to the car was the dead body of Ned. His bloody throat had been cut so deeply that he was nearly decapitated. The wind swung his corpse back and forth so that it thumped against the tree. Susan screamed and ran toward the voice and the light. As she drew close, she realized the light was not coming from a flashlight. Standing there was the glowing figure of a man with a smile on his face and a large, solid, and definitely real axe in his hands. She backed away from the glowing figure until she bumped into the car. "Playing around when my back was turned," the ghost whispered, stroking the sharp blade of his axe with his fingers. "You've been very naughty." The last thing she saw was the glint of the axe blade in the eerie, incandescent light.
Number 2.
In some television markets, people get two different versions of the same channel. This is usually caused by affiliates being nearby. For example, while living in New Jersey, receiving the ABC affiliate from both New York City and Philadelphia, or living in Southern California and getting both the Los Angeles and San Diego stations. For the most part, these appear to be the same channel in all, except local news and some daytime programming, with the exception that one is actually closer and more clear than the other. These channels, in reality, should not occur. Television markets are set up to focus around one city, and offering two different versions of the same channel in one market can split viewership in the ever-competing ratings race. If you were to watch the channel with worse reception from the city that is further away, you'll start to notice that the news reports major events that never occurred on people that aren't real on technology that shouldn't exist. The ads are for products that you've never heard of. The conspiracy theorists think that these television stations belong to an alternate world. They point to the fact that the news tends to be getting worse over there, more separate from our own. There are reports of looking into the alternate world and invading it for their own. Just pray they aren't talking about us.
Number 3.
Imagine this: a city built into a monolithic cavern in an almost endless desert. A bright, beautiful city, alive, markets, streets, lights, and people. Imagine a modern-day Rome, a Rome built in the earth. This city, the inhabitants called Cairn, referring to the stone that the city was made of. Now, imagine this city in its prime and in its glory, housing a secret, a dark secret, a secret that was its ultimate downfall. The city, they had not built themselves. Oh no. Before them, the cave had tribal inhabitants, hideous beings truly. They were not humans, by no means. Close, but not close enough. The people who planned on living in this ideal, already beautiful cavern had no wish to live with these beings. But they did not know the cavern, as the tribals did. So the leader of these human travelers thought of an idea. To gain the trust of these tribals, to learn this unfamiliar territory, the humans decided to test this idea. Unfortunately for the tribals, it worked. It happened all at once. The women and children were first. Using whatever they could find, rocks, bricks, and other blunt objects, the humans smashed their heads in, broke their bones, and destroyed their homes. The men were all that were left. They were imprisoned and forced into slavery, forced to build the monuments to these people, of these people, for these people. And when they were finished, they were slaughtered, their blood spilled into the streets. But these tribals did not tell the humans everything. Oh no. And that is why the humans did not know of what else resided in the cavern. What these tribals revered as a god. The Elector was a creature with skin as black as night, but eyes the color of the whitest clouds. A creature that sensed death and smelled life. A creature with hatred for these humans. Hatred for them because of the slaughter of its worshippers. And this creature wanted blood for blood. It started out as rumors between the people. A strange creature sighted on the outskirts, nothing unusual for them. And then people began going missing, only to return several days later, for their minds to be completely absent and their eyes completely dull. This began to cause alarm within the city, and voices cried out for these people to be sent into the desert to die. The council within the city hall met soon after this to discuss it. No sooner, they had decided to go with the rest of the city's thoughts. Then there was a great rumbling. They rushed out of the city hall to see, and they saw the rest of their city screaming in terror. A rock slide had blocked the only way in or out of the cavern. Not long after the rock slide occurred, all the lights citywide went out. And that's when the Elector began to have its real fun. A single screaming noise began. This was enough to drive some mad at that moment, and they began clawing at the rocks, ripping the fingers from their hands. All the while, the single scream became multiple screams. The older humans recognized them as the screams of the tribals. Most commit suicide soon after, but not all. Some thought to try to hide, to live out the rest of their days in the empty shell of the once great city. But the Elector was not yet done with them. The survivors were unaware of its ability to smell life. In the pitch-black darkness, the Elector was invisible, save for its eyes. In the darkness, it moved, almost as a wraith. Smelling out the last life in the city, it moved towards the building the survivors were taking shelter in. Its presence so nearby made one of them sick, and that was enough. Not long after, the sick one died, and this startled the rest of them, making them paranoid. And then the corpse started twitching and shaking, began foaming from the mouth, and this was enough for the remaining survivors. As fast as they could, they fled the building. They ran and ran into the darkness, right into the waiting trap of the Elector. The city remains still standing in a long-forgotten desert. It remains deep under the sands and lost. Some believe the whispers continue, and as for the corpses, they become what they slaughtered and hated most. So deep underground, they forgot what the sun looks like. They have lost all need to see it. But it seems, in the nature of man, to be the murderers, only soon after, to become the murdered.